Hello, and welcome to Small Biz Spotlight. I'm Donnell Dantzler. We have the distinct honor of having Ray Dempsey, founder of Dempsey Inclusion Group LLC, join us today to give some perspectives for our small business owners and entrepreneurs at large. Welcome, Ray.
Donnell, thanks for having me. I'm delighted to be here with you. I love that you're doing this series.
Thank you.
It's a great opportunity for small business owners to listen and learn from each other, and I'm in need of some of that. I am now officially a small business owner after spending more than 30 years in the corporate world. So this is exactly the kind of thing that I want to participate in, both as a listener and to the extent that I can to contribute.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. I'm sure you have a wealth of knowledge to share. With that in mind, can you give me some perspective on what your journey has been and what you feel like you took from the experience you've had along the way in your career?
I call my career a great adventure. I'm an engineer by background. We studied engineering together just a few years ago.
Yes.
Along the way, I picked up an MBA, just like I know you have recently, Donnell. And so I spent more than 30 years in BP doing all kinds of things from real engineering and operations. I worked in technical facilities. I ran a region of retail sites, gas stations in the
Mhm.
Southeast US. I did a bunch of jobs called strategy of
Mhm.
various forms. I worked in finance, I worked in
Wow.
investor relations. I spent time leading the commercial efforts of our US fuels operations. And then I had that chance to go and support a terrible tragedy in the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. And while it was a terrible tragedy and an extraordinarily difficult situation, it gave me a transition into a new phase of my career. I was supporting the efforts in Florida through much of 2010. And through the course of the response, I had the chance to testify before Congress three times.
Wow.
And Donnell, I tell people I messed those up less than everybody else. So they invited me to move to Washington and keep talking to people. So I took up a role as the head of external affairs in Washington, D.C. And that's what led me serendipitously to what I've described now as my mission and my purpose. Well, head of external affairs, I sat on BP's diversity council. And I'd done lots of things in the diversity space over my career as a volunteer and as a participant, sometimes as a speaker, but it had never been my job.
Mhm.
And sitting at the council, somebody came into the room at one point and showed a bunch of data and said things were fine. And the story goes, Donnell, that I proceeded to flip over the table and have a big fit. And I tell everybody, I promise I did not flip over the table because it was too heavy. But I did have a fit because I knew we were kidding ourselves. We were
Right,
not
right.
looking at the data in the right way. We were aggregating things that we needed to disaggregate. We were looking at outputs and should have been looking at some inputs.
Mhm.
So I challenged that team to go back and look more carefully. They did.
Mhm.
And they came back and said we had some serious challenges.
Right,
And
right.
so my boss, the chairman and president of BP America, asked me what I thought we should do. And I wrote a 2-page paper outlining what I believe were the key elements of doing
Mhm.
work in this space that would drive real and measurable results. And before I knew it, I had a new job. And in many ways, Donnell, as the saying goes, the rest is history. I discovered that leading diversity, equity, inclusion wasn't just my next job. It became clear it was my mission, my purpose,
Mm.
and shaped the way I've organized my professional career. I left BP after more than 30 years and went to Barclays, a
Yeah.
British-based bank,
Okay.
and served there as chief diversity officer for 3 years. I just retired just a couple of months ago now from Barclays, and I've launched my
Congratulations.
own advisory to continue my focus in diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's the Dempsey Inclusion Group.
Mhm.
Right now, the Dempsey Inclusion Group is just me, and I'm very happy for that to be true. And my aim is to leverage my experience, my expertise across those giant enterprises and trying to drive real and measurable impact in a way that can be useful and supportive of the efforts at other companies, not just in the US, but around the world.
Oh man, that is so awesome. What a story. I mean, I think about that, the many experiences you've had in the many different categories in the business arena are amazing and stellar. And for you to effectively end up in the diversity and inclusion is like a perfect place to be, really, to kind of set up and keep the focus on really fulfilling the needs in that arena. When you think back, on your career, um, you mentioned, the challenge that was in play that really kind of shaped that. What would you say was, I guess, a key skill set that you applied as you address those matters? When I think about, a lot of small business owners, or think about folks in business in general, dealing with crisis is a challenging thing, and many people address it and deal with it in different ways. What types of things did you apply as you experience those things and handle it?
It's a great question, Donnell, and it is something that I think a lot about and talk about with people. As an engineer, I find that sometimes the things that I have leveraged most in my career are the things that most people do not associate with people with an engineering degree.
Mm-hmm.
I've got dear engineering friends who sometimes describe me as the anti-engineer, not because I'm against engineering. I still think and behave like an engineer in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
But the two things that I think have mattered most in much of my career, in ways that sometimes was a surprise, is communication, the ability to create a clear and effective and compelling message. I have seen and worked with brilliant engineers who probably came up with some of the greatest designs and ideas and contributed to technology.
Mm-hmm.
But if they lacked the ability to talk about what that work could do, what it could
Right.
be, to secure the financing, to grow it, to scale it, without the ability to really clearly and powerfully tell the story of what it is that you can do, it's really hard to navigate across the corporate world, or with customers and clients, or frankly with any stakeholders. And I don't know why I made such an effort to sharpen my ability to communicate,
Mm-hmm.
in many ways, not just speaking, but in written form, in the products and materials and documents that I would create. But I did make it a point to distinguish my ideas, my thinking, my efforts through the way that it was powerfully communicated.
Wow.
You mentioned the crisis response, and unfortunately, I have seen many,
Mm-hmm.
but it was terrific learning. And when I reflect back on the skill sets that I think matter most, I'm reminded in my high school class wheel that is read
Wow.
at the end of the school year. It's part of the senior
Mm-hmm.
ceremonies.
Mm-hmm.
My high school senior class gifted my ability to be calm, cool, and collected to the
Okay.
junior class in my high
Okay.
school. I'm sure I thought that was kind of funny then. I'm not sure I really fully understood or appreciated how valuable that capacity was. But I think a big reason why BP asked me to sit in the seats that I did in the middle of what was often described as the biggest corporate crisis ever is that I do have that ability to remain calm, cool, and collected, to remember the purpose, the mission, to be mindful of the facts and the data, and not to be drawn into sometimes the emotional and in this case, in fact, political challenges
Right.
that were
Right.
part of what needed to be managed and shared on behalf of the company. So interestingly, Donnell, while I still think like an engineer, I make spreadsheets when I have to go buy something. I'm still quite analytical.
Right.
The the two skills that I think matter most relate to communication and the capacity to remain calm and cool in the midst of great challenge.
Right. I will tell you, I can't tell you how many times that question of having an engineering or technical background and the lack of communication. So you're very unique in that regard, in my mind. I mean, so many talk about being in that arena. So you're totally a real exception, in that regard. That's tremendous. When I think about, just where you're looking to take your business, what are your goals? What problems are you trying to solve? What potential customers or other stakeholders are you trying to reach with your current endeavor?
Yeah, it's a great question, and again, one that I've thought a lot about. I'm not sure that I've got the final answer to
Okay.
that question, but I know how I am
Mm-hmm.
starting in this venture. There's a couple of things that I want to make sure I say about being a small business, though. I
Mm-hmm.
have been a champion of small businesses and diverse businesses for
Sure.
a long time. Even in my role at BP as the head of external affairs and then as chief diversity officer, in my portfolio in both those cases was the supplier diversity team for the firm.
Okay.
And so I invested myself in really learning and understanding the whole small business landscape, the minority business enterprise community. I sat on the board of the National Minority Supplier Development Council, the NMSDC. I led a working group in WeBank, the Women's Business Enterprise National
Mm-hmm.
Council. Those organizations are near and dear to my heart, and what they do to support and enable small and minority owned businesses, women owned businesses to grow and scale and ultimately to do businesses with big companies like the ones I worked in. It matters a lot. So reflecting on that experience and what I learned in those contexts,
Mm-hmm.
it has made quite a difference in the way I've thought about my own firm. But there's a couple of things that are true in the first instance. I'm not yet focused on growing or scaling, Donnell. My Dempsey Inclusion Group is a group of, at the moment, just one. It's just me. I'm not looking to hire any employees or additional staff. I'm not immediately focused on trying to secure, a continuously growing set of clients.
Mm-hmm.
My initial focus is to get about 10, maybe a dozen clients where I'll work on sort of a retainer and longer term basis where I can leverage my professional experience, my lived experience to provide the kind of advice and support they need to do work in diversity, equity, and inclusion that is meaningful and measurable.
Mm.
It may be that as time goes by, I'll discover that the opportunities to either partner with other organizations
Okay.
to get into some sort of a consortium may mean that there's an opportunity to do a bit of growing, a bit of scaling, and even further down the road as I cultivate some of my own unique points of view, products. I have a couple of books that I'm working on.
Awesome.
Then maybe it'll be time to think about how to actually grow and scale so that we can deliver more support even more broadly than I will in these initial days. That approach won't work for everybody. I have the benefit of actually having retired from 34 years in the corporate world. And
Right.
so I'm intentional about taking my time and being measured about the way I'll first introduce myself as a supplier in this space and then to be thoughtful about the way it grows over time.
I love it. Oh, that's perfect. That's a good seat to be sitting in.
Mm.
I would say. So, if we, as we get to a wrap up, let me ask you, as a leader over the years, what would you point out as maybe 2 to 3 key things that a business owner, a small entrepreneur, really trying to make their business move forward? What are a couple of maybe 2 or 3 things you would offer up as a key, I guess, skills that they would want to employ as far as being a leader and really, getting their folks to be engaged and really focus on their vision, etc. What are some of the things you might offer up?
I think what I want to say to this question, Donnell, might not be exactly what you're thinking about,
Mm-hmm.
but I think it really matters. I've met so many small business owners who are really, really good at that thing that they do, whatever that thing is,
Mm-hmm.
and it's that love and that passion and that commitment to their craft that causes them to launch themselves as a business.
Okay.
Sometimes, more often than I wish were true, while they're really good at that thing, sometimes they're just not very good at all at the other stuff that
Mm-hmm.
is a necessary element of running a successful business.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's the financial, whether it's the legal, whether it's marketing and promotions and sales, there are things that are part of actually guiding a broader enterprise
Mhm.
that don't always come naturally or easily to people who are really good at a thing. And so my encouragement and my view of what real leadership represents is to know the things that you're good at, to be conscious of the things you're not good at, and to surround yourself with the right team, the right
Love
people,
it.
whether it's on your staff or whether it's external resources, to help ensure that all those things that matter so much in the way that your business shows up to customers and clients, the way your business shows up in the world is a positive reinforcement of your dedication and excellence in that craft, and not one that leaves people with a bad taste because they just couldn't manage to get from you what it is that they needed in the way their business operates. Leadership sometimes means that you can't do all the things that need to be done,
Mm.
and it depends on your ability to recognize that and to surround yourself with the right skills and the right talent. And if there's somebody else who's better at telling the story of your business than you, that
Right.
might be
That's
okay too. It might be
right.
okay for you to just be in the background being really good at that thing, but
Yes.
ensure that you just put the very best possible presentation to customers and clients.
I love it. I love it. You're so right. And it is a consideration we should all consider, as it relates to having, a person to be in the right seat,
Hmm.
for our business, including ourselves. Um, I really want to thank you. I am so honored to have you be a guest for Small Biz Spotlight and to offer some very valuable and useful information for small business owners. I know this won't be the only time. This is only the first time, and we'll continue to evolve. I'm sure there's so much more you can offer, and we'll be able to share about your own journey and your own endeavor to this point. I want to thank everyone for taking a listen to this special cast of Small Biz Spotlight. Once again, I'm Donnell Dantzler, founder and CEO of Small Biz Spotlight, and this is Ray Dempsey of Ray Inclusion Group LLC. Thank you.